everybody and welcome to the FPL Family YouTube channel. I'm Sam and today we are going to be talking about mid-priced midfielders. Now these are, or is the position really that I find one of the more challenging to pick from because there are often a number of options and it's often determined by budget and what you have remaining, because by the time you've picked those really important premium players and then you start looking around at other players that you definitely know you want to have in your team, this mid-price point can prove to be a little bit challenging. But they are the sort of player that if you get on the right one in pre-season and you have them for a few game weeks when they're doing really well, they will quickly grow in price, making your team value grow, and that is all the more helpful in the latter part of the season and the further into the season we get. So getting this right, it's not the end of the world if it doesn't go well. These are positions where we can take a bit of a risk because there's plenty of other players we can move to and swap with, particularly in that first wildcard if it's not going quite so well. And they're also players that we can really focus in on fixtures. And if they have a really nice run of fixtures, they might be the perfect ones to go for. So when we're talking about mid-price players, for me, I'm going to be starting with the 7.5s. They are the kind of most expensive players that I see as being in that mid-price midfielder bracket. And we're going to drop all the way down to the 6 million midfielders. Now, some people like to look at the 5.5s, but for me, I'm going to stop at 6, and I'll tell you why when we get to that stage. So these are the 7 picks that you can have at 7.5 million. And there are a number of interesting picks. Now, one of the things that I love about FPL and I love about the way that official FPL prices players is when they pop players from the same team at the same price point, because it makes you make a choice. And there are some players in here, I'm looking at Greenwood, I'm looking at Pogba, I'm looking at Ziyech, and I'm looking at Mount, and I'm thinking very clever FPL, because now that conversation about who is worth the most is very valuable and it's very valid in terms of choosing between them. So let's start with the Chelsea boys, I think. So when we have a look at Ziyech, there is some rumour and twittering around in the community that he may go on loan this season. I'm not sure that I can see that happening, but AC Milan are apparently interested. It's Mount of the two of them that I would be going for, and you can see that across the community with the percentage ownerships that we have so far. So Mount, they're owned by over 20% of the game. Ziyech owned by under 1% of the game. Now, in part, of course, that goes back to what Mount did over the course of last season. He had a phenomenal season last time around. And when I went into the FF Scout members area before coming on to film this video, and I'll show you some graphics from them in a minute, I did a 3-player comparison of the three of them. Mount, Gundogan, who we also have here, and Liverpool's Jota, who again we have in the same price point. So I took these 3 because these are the 3 that are owned by the most in the game so far, and also, to be honest, they're the standout picks from last season at this price point in terms of the midfielders. So when you kind of do that 3-player comparison in the new members area, we see Mount winning 8. He has 8 green wins across his. Gundogan has 3 green wins and Jota just the 2. So actually it makes it really interesting. Goals, Mount got 6, Gundogan had 13, Jota had 9. Mount had 7 assists, Gundogan had 4, Jota had none, but we did have a lot of differences in terms of their minutes. We also had a lot of differences when we have a little look at their heat map. So this is one of the things that you are now able to do in the new Fantasy Football Scout members area, and if you aren't already a member, there is a link in the description below which will get you 20% off. But we can now compare 3 different players and we can see how they were scoring in different areas. So what we've got here so far then is the heat maps from last season. So we can see some of the benefits from Gundogan and from Mount. Obviously they're on corners and you can see that in the corner flag position, which Jota doesn't have. We can also see where they are in the game. So Jota much more focused down his wing, Mount a bit all over the place, and Gundogan the same. But Gundogan's matches last time around he was a different player, wasn't he, when KDB was out injured, and that is something that we need to bear in mind. One of the other things that we can do in the new members area is beautifully compare the stats for these players as part of a radar graph, and we can see how they're sitting. So obviously their level, as you can see there for FPL price, all coming in at 7.5 million this year, but then you can see the differences. So Gundogan there in yellow, Jota there in green, and Mount in that kind of bluey blacky colour. So actually for me, looking at the radars, looking at the heat maps, it's Mount that comes out as the standout pick. When we look at the underlying stats, though, maybe it suggests it should have been Gundogan. So Gundogan was 6th and Mount was 7th for midfielders for BPS last season. Mount created 87 chances, which was the second best in the league last time around. He was also 4th for crosses with 170, 60 of those being successful. And he was 4th for touches in the opposition half with 1,742. He was the second best Chelsea player for goals and also for assists last time around, and was the top Chelsea player for attempts on goal. So he kind of wins it out in the Chelsea perspective. Of course, Gundogan, he had a phenomenal season. He had 14 big chances, which was the most across all of the 7.5 million, even if we go back to them. Across all of these guys, Gundogan had the most big chances. Jota came in second with 13. So when we're having a little look at them, we kind of have to make some tough calls. Now, Mount, you would think, is going to be as ever present and as popular in that Chelsea side this time around as he was last year. But with Gundogan, there is some slight risk elements there. And I don't mean risks necessarily in terms of rotation, because I think of all of the Man City players, he's one of the most rotation proof. But his position may be rotated. So we saw last time around when KDB wasn't there, he played in a much more forward position, much more attacking position. But then there have been other games this season, particularly when Torres has been up top and KDB's also been involved, that we've seen Gundogan take a much more kind of defensive midfield position. And so for us as FPL managers, going for him at this point in pre-season feels to me to be a little bit risky, because we don't yet know what that Manchester City side is going to look like. We don't really yet know who they're onboarding in terms of, is Harry Kane coming? Is Jack Grealish coming? And is KDB fully fit after his exploits at the Euro? So Gundogan for me will be one to watch, but I'm not going to bring him in. Mount, the fixtures aren't exactly brilliant, so that does put me off a little bit. But the underlying stats from last season look really good. But Jota has decent underlying stats, as I mentioned. His stats don't look bad at all. And I suspect he might get more game time this season for Liverpool. And of course, those opening fixtures for Liverpool look very, very enticing, particularly for the double up. So it would be a tough call for me between Jota and Mount. But I probably, if going in at the 7.5 million price point, would just go Jota at this point, simply because of the fixtures, knowing that I can easily move over to Mount when the fixtures start to shift for the better for him. Moving down then to the 7 million category. So again, we don't have very many players in this category either this time around, but we do have some kind of interesting picks. And again, we're seeing multiple players from the same club in this same bracket. So let's start with the Leicester City boys, because we've got Barnes and Madison both in here. Madison owned by nearly 12% of the game. Barnes at just 7.5%, nearly 7.5% of the game. Interesting, because I think I prefer Barnes over Madison this time around. So last time out, Barnes made 25 appearances for Leicester, whereas Madison made 31. Across the course of the season, Barnes had 9 goals to Madison's 8. He had 5 assists to Madison's 7. So more goals for Barnes, but more assists for Madison. In terms of yellow cards, none for Barnes over the course of the season, but 4 for Madison. Now, of course, that's not something that should play a massive part in your decision making, but it is just something to kind of bear in mind and keep in the back of your mind. For XG, Barnes had an XG of 5.92 to Madison's 3.87. He had an XA of 2.41 to Madison's 3.40, and an XGI of 8.33 to Madison's 7.21, which would make me go in the favour of Barnes. I personally think that Barnes' positioning on the field, and as we saw during the course of last season when he was fit and available, he played in a much more forward position, kind of almost alongside Vardy a lot of the time. And that's where we saw, of course, Iheanacho when Barnes wasn't there. So we've got to see what Brendan Rodgers does with this Leicester City side. But in choosing one or the other, it would be Barnes of the Leicester City boys that I would fancy a little bit more. Let's go right to the bottom of this list and just talk for a second about Zaha, because owned by 6.5% of the game, so not insignificant ownership. The fixtures are dreadful for Crystal Palace in this early part of the season, but we do and are likely probably to see some new manager bounce. And we've heard from Patrick Vieira that he wants to play this more attacking football, more ball possession, which will suit Zaha and Zaha's game. The underlying stats for Zaha, I looked these up thinking, gosh, they're going to be dreadful. They aren't by any stretch of the imagination. So for the 2020-21 season, he had an XG of 8.10. He had an XA of 3.85 and an XGI of 11.95. Those stats suggest that there is definitely scope in here. New manager bounce, if it comes, he is a purple patch player. We know what kind of player he is. He was second for goals scored last season for the mids under 7.5. So again, not bad underlying stats for Zaha, but I think we need to wait and see with Crystal Palace, and we need to kind of wait and play out what happens with them across the rest of this pre-season and who they manage to bring in if anybody else comes in. A quick word on Lingard. At the moment, sitting there in a Manchester United shirt, it's an absolute no from me, but if he goes back to West Ham, he's back in the conversation again for sure. Then we've got two Manchester City boys in Torres and Bernardo. I'm not really sure you're going either of those. Last season, Bernardo had 24 starts, 2 goals and 6 assists. He had the better XA of these two. Torres, he had 15 starts, 7 goals, 2 assists, and he had the better XG and XGI. But game time is going to be limited with these guys, and I'm not sure that you really want to be spending £7 million on them. Then we've got the Everton boys. Again, I think I'm not even going to really talk about them both because there are better options at Everton, none less than, of course, Dominic Calvert-Lewin up top and Luke Dean in defence. So I don't think you're going to spend £7 million on either Sigurdsson or James Rodriguez. Right, into the £6.5 million category. So we're starting to get a few more players here. We've got 11. So we've got a couple that I think you kind of rule out. Bowen, I don't think you're going with him at West Ham. If he does get this move that is being kind of muted to Liverpool, I still don't think you're going there because there are some really nice picks in this category, and I'm going to pick out a couple of them now. Let's just start, I think, with Buendia because he's kind of the obvious standout pick in this list, maybe owned by, so far, 11.9% of the game. Last time he was in the Premier League, he was third for chances created, creating 83. Only KDB and Grealish had more than he did in his last season here. Last time around, he had 111 shots in the Championship, 15 goals, 16 assists. We've already seen him assisting Watkins in pre-season. I really, really like this, and I really like the opening 3 fixtures that he has going into this new season. So for me, he is one that I think will be growing increasingly popular over the course of this pre-season. Rafinha in there is the most popular player across this price point, 22% of the game owning him so far. The fixtures aren't great, but he did have a really good season last season. I'll talk about him in a little bit later when we talk about Harrison, because you can save 0.5 by going Harrison, so we'll have a little look at the two of them together in a little while. JWP's on that list for Southampton. Now again, I think this is going to depend on what happens with Danny Ings and whether he remains at the club after the season begins. He was third for midfielders for BPS last season, 5th best for passes with 2,434. 2,102 of those, were successful ones. Is on set pieces. There is some potential there, but I'm yet to see much from Southampton that's going to make me want to invest, particularly when I look across the rest of this team and I can see some other really interesting picks in there. We've got both Dele Alli and Lucas Moura in there for Spurs. Dele Alli. Here's my jammy pick of this pre-season. I genuinely do think he is going to have a good season this time around. He played out of position for Spurs in a pre-season friendly the other week, up top. Linked up amazingly again with Sonny, and it was kind of like going back a couple of years to see those two playing together. He had the 3rd best minutes per goal ratio at Spurs last season, only beaten by Kane and Bale, and of course Bale won't be there next season, and who knows whether Kane will be there next season. Dele's underlying stats actually for the last few seasons look really promising, and he seems to be getting the trust of Nuno Espirito Santo, and he seems to be getting game time in pre-season. If that continues, I think he could be a really nice pick. Saka's the other one that looks like a decent option in that list for me. 5 goals from 61 attempts last season. He was one of the standout players at Arsenal, and he could save a little bit more and go with the likes of Smith Rowe, but Saka for me is one that I will be taking a very, very keen eye on, particularly in this early part of the season. Trossard then, just to finish up on these guys, was second for XGI for Brighton last time, only Maupay had more, and he was top for XA. So there's some potential there, but I think the trouble with Brighton is they are very much more defensively minded, and from an FPL perspective, the defence offers much more in the way of potential. Although having said that, with so many injuries and players potentially leaving the club, might be difficult to pick those Brighton players in defence as well. Dropping down another price point then, we've got loads of options in the £6 million category. I'm not going to talk about them all because this video would be about 3 hours long, but we will just have a quick talk about some of them. So Harrison last season had 18 goal involvements, which was 2 more than Rafinha, who we've just seen on the previous slide was owned by, is more expensive by 0.5 million, created 10 big chances last time around. Most assists for midfielders under 7.5 last season, with 10 for him also. I really like Harrison. I think he could have a phenomenal season. And if you go back and watch the Leeds deep dive or have a little look at the new signings video, the first part 1, there's a lot of stuff in there about Harrison. I really do think that he will be a good pick in this early part of the season, even with Leeds' fixtures as they are. A little quick look at Gross then. 3 penalties for him last season, took 137 corners for Brighton. 38 of those were successful. That was the most of any other Brighton player by over 3 times, by the way. So indeed, he looks like it could potentially be a better pick than Trossard even, who was that little bit more expensive if you're looking to save some money. He was also second for crosses with 219 of those 67 were successful. Souček's in this list also top for aerial duels with 387. He won 227 of those, got 10 goals last season. Only Gundogan and Pereira and Zaha managed to get more goals than he did in the 2020-21 campaign. He was also top for headed goal attempts with 31. The next best had 15. So really, really good stuff from him last time around. I really like Souček. It'd be interesting to see how many people go with him because I think there are some other really attacking options in here, but Souček might therefore be one that gets a bit overlooked, and I think that would be to our detriment. The other one that I want to kind of pull out is Zaha, Watford's top scorer last season with 13 goals and 4 assists, 86 goal attempts for him, 57 shots in the box, more than any other Watford player, and 42 key passes, which was the second best for Watford last season. Now, for me, Watford's fixtures and the form of Zaha last time around make him a really nice option, particularly if you are looking for attacking players at Watford, because with 10 forwards listed in the game, very difficult to choose one of those. So I would be going with Zaha in that position. Just a quick shout out to Georgina, because when I was having a look at his goal conversion rate of 50%, which I thought was quite frankly unbelievable, and of course is the best of the 7.5s. I don't think you're really going to pick him. If you do, you're picking him just for set pieces, and there are so many options in here that you're picking for way, way more than that. Quick little look then at this comparison heat map between Mount and Harrison. Now, I had a little look in the members area FF Scout and did a comparison of the two of them. You can see they're fundamentally, the positions that they take up on the pitch are very, very different. And when you have a little look at the underlying stats, they're also quite different, but they're very even, and we're talking about a massive price difference. Mount is priced at 7.5, Harrison priced at 6 million, so 1.5 million, which is really going to be useful across the rest of your team. So last time around, Mount got 32 starts to Harrison's at 34, so Harrison wins in that category. Harrison got 8 goals to Mount 6, so again a win for Harrison there. Assists, 8 for Harrison, 5 for Mount, again Harrison wins there. Fantasy assists, 2 each. Total assists then 7 for Mount and 10 for Harrison last time round. Mount did manage more clean sheets with 14 to Harrison's 11. Mount also had a better XG than Harrison did with 6.23 to Harrison's 5.88. Non-penalty XG though, Harrison wins 5.88 because he didn't take any, to 5.53 because Mount did last time around. XA, Harrison of 4.99, so not hugely good in terms of the assists, in terms of the expected number, but he did get lots and he did beat him for actual assists. But Mount beats him in that underlying stat of 6.89. XG on target though, Harrison wins that one. XGI, that's Mount's. Minutes per pass received, 1.84 Mount to 2.84 Harrison. Penalty area touches, 140 for Mount to 119 for Harrison. Minutes per goal, 482 for Mount to 356.9 for Harrison, so significantly better for the Leeds United boy. Goal attempts more than double actually. Mount 85 to Harrison's 45, nearly double. Shot accuracy, Harrison's was better, 42.2 to 31.7. Goal conversion, Harrison's was better, 17.8 to 7.3. Set piece threat, 14 attempts for Mount, 5 from Harrison. Corners taken, 126 by Mount, 38 by Harrison. Successful corners then 75 for Mount. 47 for Mount and 9 for Harrison. So when we add those up, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 wins for Harrison to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 for Mount. So the underlying stats and the point of that is they're actually very similar. So don't be afraid to save a little bit of money sometimes and look at the cheaper options, particularly if they are enabling you to fill your team with some additional forwards. I think that £6 million category has real potential in there. You've got the likes of Harrison, you've got the likes of Zaha. Even if you spend a little bit more, you've got the likes of Dele Alli, you've got the likes of Saka and Buendia. You've got some really nice, good price points there. And there's no reason why you can't go back to the 7.5 millions when their fixtures change for the better in terms of Mount anyway. That's it for mid-priced midfielders. Let me know in the comments below who you think is the best mid-priced midfielder and who you're going to be starting the season with. If you've enjoyed this video, leave me a like and don't forget to hit that subscribe button before you go. Thanks, guys.